Good evening and welcome to the Monday night, July 20th meeting of the Speedway Redevelopment Commission. I'd like to call the meeting to order and begin with board introductions. To my right is board member Gordon Rundle. To my left is Secretary Rhonda Schwartz. To Rhonda's left is the Speedway Schools representative, Dr. Terry Reed. In our audience, being socially distanced, is our Vice President, Jennifer Miller. Additionally, in the audience is our Economic Development Director, Tim Gropp, as well as our Executive Assistant, Tim Ramian, and Vince Noblet from the Town Council is also in attendance this evening. Thank you guys all for coming. This meeting had been posted according to all Indiana state law, and we have confirmed that we do have a quorum. We'll proceed with the meeting. I'd like to know if anybody likes to make any public comment. Seeing nobody moving to the lectern, we'll proceed past public comment, and we'll move on to consent of the meeting minutes for the executive session and the regular session held on June 15th, 2020. Does anyone have any edits or changes or corrections to the meeting minutes? Hearing none, we'll approve the meeting minutes with consent. And moving on to item 6, approval of claims and expenses. Tim, could you go over the claims for us, please?
Yeah, a couple things to point out, and then one recommendation to that doesn't need to be on here, so when we approve it, -1 claim. The ASI, no trespassing signs, are related to the 10th and Poco fencing, which is currently going up. Those are specialty signs that are required by Praxair. Beyond that, there's a lot of TIF this time. Structure point is the ongoing design of the 16th Street lot. If you look down kind of middle page, you'll see a Gordon Flesh Company copies. That was mistakenly put on our claim. So when you approve it, it'll be without that specific claim on there. That'll be paid from the town. Beyond that, the two HG Rebar Speedway are associated with Founders Square, so those, if you look on your actual versus budget, those are reflected up top in the 2500 High School Road line item, not in the actual budget. The Marion County Treasurer, we had approved the spring payments last time. And then also we forgot to process 4501 West 16th Street. So that is processed for spring and fall, and we went ahead and paid the fall payments as well. So we should be done with any property tax payments at this point for any of the properties that we have. Then the rest at the bottom, you'll notice all the U.S. Bank. That was bond payment time, so you saw our TIF account significantly drop. We're still anticipating a draw in August for property taxes. We don't know what percentage we'll collect, but that is the reason for that drop. We have about $600,000 in the TIF account now. That is all the bond expenses, 16th and Main improvements as well. We're finishing up that engineering, so happy to answer any questions on the claims.
Does anyone have any questions? Hearing no questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve the claims as submitted, subtract less the Gordon Flesh Company.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion that we approve the claims as submitted, minus that one expense.
Second.
Hearing the motion and a second, we'll proceed with a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes 4-0. All right, and we'll move on to item number 7, the director's report.
All right. Sorry, you're going to hear a lot from me tonight. Everything's going pretty smooth around town. I mentioned 10th and Poco fencing is underway. Going a little slower than I anticipated, but it's looking really nice. They're starting the Poco side. It's going to be sharp when it's all done. I'm glad that we went with the decorative fencing over there. As we mentioned as well, like earlier, 1300 block, we're just getting started with, it's on the agenda later, getting started with negotiations on that and starting to ramp that up over the next 30 days, hopefully. Quick update on the Wilshaw project, the hotel project. So early on, but there is a potential partner in place that is negotiating with Loftus Robinson. It's still too early to name them, and there's still a lot of due diligence. So there's a general form of a partnership there that is being worked out, and they're digging into the details of the financing and other aspects of this deal to see if they can make this work. So far, it looks promising, but there's still a long way to go. If this works out, we'll be engaging with the new partnership group to work out the details of figuring out how we can move forward and what that timeline looks for. So there's some hope there. We feel positive about it right now, but it's still too early to say it's a done deal by any means. And we hope to have more information for both you, the town council, and the public as soon as it becomes available. But as we've seen with this project, it can derail pretty quickly, so we don't want to get too excited. We don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. Just wanted everybody to know that there is, discussions have been ongoing, and there's a potential partnership being worked out that would enable this project to finally move forward at some point. Town Hall is continuing to move along. The site, the exterior site, people are all out there now working on site. It was getting pretty unruly. They pulled a lot of the landscape out. Everything seems to be in line. They're still targeting early December to hand it over to us, and that hasn't changed recently, so that's positive. And everything's looking really nice there, and just a lot of details and things that you think of after the fact. So we're trying to work through some change orders and make sure that when we open it, it's ready to go and serves the public for a long time. But in general, that project's going pretty well, and we're excited about it. And then Founders Square, it's just a timing issue right now. Everything's going okay. We obviously closed down High School Road and 25th Street to be able to do the traffic work. We're waiting on the subcontractor right now. They were able to make the cuts in the road, and they were able to pull out everything. So we're waiting on Calumet to do the concrete work. As soon as we can get that to a safe portion, we'll try to open 25th Street up as soon as possible. We've been telling everybody a month because that's what the contractor has told us, but we are pushing on them to try and get that open as soon as possible. So hopefully Calumet will be out there working sooner than later and getting new curbs and medians in place so that we can open up 25th Street to allow traffic in and out again. So we are communicating with those businesses, and we've made some adjustments since we closed that road, and we've restricted some parking up on Parkwood and I forgot the cross street now, Hickorywood, to accommodate buses and fire trucks in the interim. But our goal is to have that open as soon as possible. Everything else on site is waiting on IPL to pull the final polls, which I believe they're waiting on Comcast, which was supposed to be last Friday. So I did not find out what that delay was, but as soon as those come down, they're just waiting to dig the pond. Then they can finish up the stormwater, and then it's a matter of paving the road and putting in the sidewalks. So again, Calumet needs to be on site for the concrete work. So everything else is in line. There's still a lot of little details to go. Some of the property with AT&T, the El Rodeo component of that still isn't all finalized, and but we're getting there. And hopefully we'll be able to finish that up in the next month or month and a half and be ready for tenants to start building hopefully this fall. With that, I'll be happy to entertain any questions.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Grout? Thank you for the director's report. And you don't have to go anywhere. You can stay right there for the new business report as well, please.
All right. Well, thank you. So this is an annual report that we have to do. It's part of what was called House Enrolled Act 1242 in 2018. It was passed to enable better transparency with our overlapping taxing units, and to let them know what the redevelopment commission for each community is doing with the TIF dollars that are collected. With that being said, we put out our notice the same time that we passed the other obligation, which was the pass-through resolution. We went ahead and noticed this meeting at the same time, and that is what this meeting is for, the overlapping taxing units. So this report is supposed to go over the Redevelopment Commission's budget in relation to TIF dollars, the long-term plans for the allocation area, which we'll look at 2020 and just talk a little bit about future projects and the impact of each taxing unit. So taking a look back of what we used the dollars for and what progress has been made. So if we can go ahead, one more. I just did that one, forgot to have them do it. So like I said, we'll talk about 2019 financial review. We're obviously a little later. When it first passed in July of 2018, we went ahead and got one done by the end of the year. It was a little unknown of what the timing was, and we decided to wait until 2020 for the next one. So you'll get a little bit of data from both into 2020 as well as 2019, but it's really supposed to focus on the 2019, basically, essentially annual report. Go ahead. So what is the role of the Speedway Redevelopment Commission? Like any redevelopment commission, we're established obviously for redevelopment. It's in the name. Revitalization of distressed properties. We also act in the role, specifically in Speedway, for business attraction, retention efforts, any small business items that come up. We have a lot of small businesses in Speedway, so we spend a lot of time on requests and initiatives to help them. And then brownfield remediation. We all know we do plenty of that around town, but that makes this community better and helps clean up properties that have been contaminated with old gas stations or tanks or whatnot. And then ultimately our goal is to increase the overall commercial assessed value of the community, and in turn the overall assessed value, which helps stabilize our community, provides jobs, creates an environment for people to live and work in, and makes us all proud of our community. So, and then on top of that, addressing workforce needs as they come up as well. So that is the role of the Redevelopment Commission. If we can go to the next slide, please. So once you have the role, you establish your allocation areas, your plan. Everything is based off an economic development plan for your community. And as I kind of mentioned, the role of those economic development plans are kind of listed here. Basically, you're retaining jobs, you're adding jobs, you're creating better, healthy, safe and healthy community, and cleaning up your dilapidated properties to make it a better place to live. That's the short version. I should mention also that this will be on our website at the end as well. So I won't spend a lot of time on every slide, but you'll be able to access it on the Speedway Redevelopment Commission website at the end. Go to the next slide. What is TIF? TIF is increase in assessed value, new assessed value above and beyond the base taxes from new development that's created. We capture an increase in real property taxes, sometimes personal property taxes. In Speedway's case, a lot is the personal property side. We'll see that in a minute. And mostly on commercial and industrial. There are residential TIFs. We tend to stay away from those and leave those for the general operating as well as the schools and overlapping units. Next slide, please. Just a couple models of how a TIF district works. It's kind of complicated on the surface, but these models show if taxes were already being generated on a property, let's say we're going to buy a property and redevelop it, those taxes will continue to flow through as they always have. What we're looking at is the increased AV of whatever project we're doing. So if we take a property that was $100,000 and they're making $1,000 on taxes, they're going to continue to pass through. But if now they're doing $3,000, we're going to capture that $2,000 increment to either pay for a bond or, as you go, lease rental payments or other activities. You know, it might be demolition, it might be environmental cleanup. We'll use that extra money to get that project done. Without that additional revenue, that project probably wouldn't happen. And that's kind of how the TIF cycle works. And they're allowed to establish allocation areas for about 25 years, and then they go away. And then all that increment at the end, which is the blue box, is just part of the town's increment at that point. The overlapping taxing units, I should say. Next slide, please. Just some examples of what you can use TIF for: infrastructure improvement, purchasing property, brownfield remediation, anything associated to cleaning up a property or acquiring a property, leases for projects, anything like that, equipment, demo. I won't spend a lot of time on that this evening. If you go to the next slide. So this is probably hard to read on the screen. Again, if you want to look at it, this is simply a list of our allocation areas, which looks complicated. Periodically, we amend them. There's a lot of reasons. TIF is really a kind of a living thing. Early on, there was a theory that you do kind of broader TIF districts, allocation areas, if you will, to capture a broader area. So if it's going to benefit everybody in the town, such as the redevelopment of Main Street, that benefit came across the entire town, you're okay kind of using a broader allocation area to help pay for those improvements. If it's going to benefit a smaller parcel to redevelop, Wilshaw, for instance, you're going to set up an allocation area specifically for that project so that other businesses and associated taxpayers aren't helping pay for those improvements. You're still getting it done. The long-term benefit is for the town, but those are kind of called spot-specific TIF districts. We do a lot more of those these days. We try, Founders Square, we set that one up as its own allocation area so that those infrastructure improvements are paid for by the tenants that are going to go out there. I tend to think that's a little better route to do it than the broader areas, but when you're first getting started, when you're doing some major improvements, you have to do the broader aspects. So from time to time, you amend that. You amend uses, you amend areas. We've taken out parcels before that don't need to be in there, and then that money then funnels back through to the overlapping taxing units as well. Next slide, please. And that is the current 2020 allocation area map. So we just updated that to include the Founders Square. So all those amendments and everything end up looking like that in a visual representation. And those areas, those are the allocation areas, which is where you collect the money. Then the EDA is essentially the town borders, which is where you can spend the money. So two different differentiations. Next slide, please. So a little financial review. Next one, please. Just looking at tax rates, I did a comparable of 2019 tax rates, 2020 tax rates. I don't believe everyone always understands all the different components that go into the tax rate, and these are the people that are affected from activities that we do, usually in the positive. We have Marion County, Wayne Township, the civil town, which is our day-to-day functions, school corporation, public library, health and hospital, public transportation, and consolidated county. All that has a portion of taxes that are collected when you get your tax bill and are distributed, and all those affect your overall tax rate without getting too deep. And then on top of that, one thing that TIF does not affect is the school referendums. So everything beyond that, school referendums are outside of your general tax rate and what is included in the TIF. So as you can see from 2009, well, you might be able to see it's pretty small up there. From 2019 to 2020, we actually had a slight decrease in tax rate. I imagine our 2021 certified rate will be a little bit higher because we'll add in the long-term debt of the Speedway Town Hall project. But I don't anticipate it being a significant increase. And without getting too in detailed of how Indiana taxes work, your tax rate and how the levies work, you never actually bring in more money, you kind of just redistribute. So, but in general, we do a good job trying to keep that tax rate down, keep it under 3%, and we're one of the lowest rates in Marion County, so we're proud of that. And our efforts are to try to keep that tax rate down for everybody. over the long term. Next slide, please. So revenues, again, these are, you take a look at them a little bit later. So I broke them into three different sections. Your TIF revenue per designated area. So if you went back to that map, you would see that we had a larger blue area, which is our real property. It's what we're capturing. That's our biggest area. There's a smaller area along Crawfordsville Road. That's area number 2. And then we collect a lot of our allocation is personal property. So that's not on the map, but lines at Allison and Praxair, when they buy equipment, we're able to capture that. That's where the majority, and this is where we're very unique, a majority of our financing is that second column, which the taller one there, which is personal property. You've seen a pretty big increase. It's a 4-year trend you see there from 17 to 20. 20 is an estimate, and those estimates are way off at this point because of COVID-19. So this was what we were estimating. The yellow is what we were estimating for 20 prior to everything going haywire on us. So take that with a grain of salt. But as you can see, we, get most of our money from personal property, which is rare and frankly a little uneasy because if the economy dips and Allison shuts down a line or something like that, that money goes away pretty quick. So we're working hard to try to diversify our money with these new projects, so we're getting more from real property because those buildings will continue to be there no matter what. That's how most are done there. So you can see there's been a slight increase in area number 1. A lot of the Main Street projects are starting to come online from when they first were built, but there's still some progress needed there. Area 2 really doesn't generate a lot for us. In fact, we've had a little bit of dip. Some of that is due to properties that we've purchased. We've also demoed some properties, so that fluctuates these as well. But overall, we've seen an increase in our overall revenue the last few years, which keeps us in line with what our debt payments are. I broke out Main Street Gateway, which is the Wilshaw bond. So that bond hasn't started paying yet, but we have started collecting some money in that allocation area. So you can see we're starting to collect, but we haven't put it against any debt yet, but we'll be fine for the payment. We get a lot of concern. Well, the hotel's not up and running yet. First of all, you have a developer backing on that, so if there's a shortfall, they would pay it, but we also are a little bit ahead of schedule on just by the time the apartments got built and assessed earlier than anticipated. They had done some partial assessments, so there's some money in the bank that can only be used in that area. So that's the other thing on the spot TIFs. You can't use them anywhere. You have to use them in or adjacent to that area with any funding that you have. And then Crawfordsville Gateway, you can see we've been collecting steadily more money. That is used to pay off the 2015 B bond, which is the Speedway Marketplace bond. That also is a developer-backed bond, and there has been a shortfall. While it's steadily increased because things have developed there, there's still a slight shortfall. It was predicted this year that we'd be about $8,000 to $11,000 short. We really need that last parcel to develop, plus the hotel hadn't been 100% assessed yet. So we anticipate that one finally going in to the black next year or so. It would be really darn close. But once we did that agreement, we'd actually pay back those shortfalls to the developer. But so we've seen a nice increase, but it's still not meeting that bond demand yet. That has not had an effect on us. So if you look at our account balance for that sub account, it's zero because all that money's going out, and then the developer's filling in that gap. So hopefully we'll start seeing a positive amount and paying back that, and by the end of it, we'll kind of a flush account. Next slide, please. So what is this revenue paying? It's paying these debt services first and foremost. So this is a list of our bonds outstanding. Original amount, outstanding amount as of December 31st, 2019. So then there was a payment in January and then June. So next year we'll update that. I did add on the very bottom there just a note because we added the Founders Square bond in early 2020. So I just put a note there that there is an additional bond, but that's not reflected in that because this is a 2019 report. But that's, the first thing you have to do is pay your debt obligations, and, you know, these paid for different projects, infrastructure, Main Street, roundabout, things like that. And that's just kind of listing out our obligations. If there happens to be excess money after that, that's what we're able to do other projects with, buy property, demo property, clean up property, do whatever we want to do, infrastructure, trails. Next slide, please. And, oops, I didn't turn mine, sorry. So this is kind of stacking that up. So if you take a look at it, 2019, which is the left slide, we had plenty to cover our debt service. So we had some excess money to be able to do projects, and we'll look at what we did with some of that in just a minute. You can see the shortfall in the middle of the Crawfordsville Road Gateway. Again, that's what the developer had to make up. That's what we brought in versus what the debt payment was. And you can see the Main Street Gateway in the 2019. It's hard to see because it was pretty flat, but there's a little bit of excess in there. And you can take a look back at 18. Again, the gap has shortened in the Crawfordsville Road Gateway. That's why I left that in there. But we're still not even on that one yet. Our goal is to be even or a little bit ahead. And then 2020 revenue, you can take a look. Again, Crawfordsville Road Gateway, you're essentially even at that point, a little bit low, and you're starting to gain some money in the Main Street Gateway account. I believe the first payment of that is either 2022 or the second half of 2021. We're debt service reserve right now, so there's no payments currently on that, and we had built in plenty of time for everything to get built and assessed, because there's always a lag on when money comes in there. 2020 was projected to be a pretty good year on the general allocation areas. I will tell you, the only stipulation that I always warn every year is these debt services, and you'll see it in the next slide. Let's go to the next slide real quick, are going up. So while it looks like we have a lot of money, if we stayed steady at where we're at, we'd have just enough to pay our debt service and no more. And that would just, assuming that everyone pays their bills every 6 months. So we need to keep growing. We need to continue to do what we're doing so that we can increase that revenue to be able to not only pay debt service, but continue on. So the green line is the debt service over the remainder of the TIF allocation area, so 2034 when the debt start rolling off there. Most of them on the bottom are the site-specific debt service. So you can see when they start, you have Crawfordsville Road corridor is the orange one that's already ongoing. You can see the yellow one is Wilshaw, which you can see still hasn't started till, it looks like the second half of 2021. And then that small blue one on the bottom is the Founder Square one, which first payment isn't due till 2023. So we still have a little bit of time on that as well. But that's what we're trying to make sure, that it might look like we have a lot of excess right now, but we need to save a reserve in for those leaner years when our income is closer to what our debt service is. So just like to point that out. We're a pretty lean, efficient redevelopment commission. If we go to the next page, please. And again, so what did we use with that quote-unquote additional beyond debt service revenue? In 2019, seemed like a lot of these were further back than they were. I can't believe they were just 2019. But we purchased 4501 West 16th Street was our biggest one, which included environmental cleanup, building demo. We have an ongoing parking rental, which is part of the Wilcox Environmental Building. We take bond fees and taxes out of there if we have those. We generally don't have taxes that long, only the year after we buy it. And then we've started doing some engineering on 16th and Main, and then we also had some additions to our economic development strategic plan. So we spent about $420,000 last year. The year previous to that, we spent about $164,000. We didn't do a lot in 2018. We did a lot of planning in 2018, getting ready for 2019. Looking at 2020, we purchased the Lenore property early on, so that'll come out of there. And then there's a lot of difference. We'll have a demo on 1300 block coming up, and we're doing some engineering on land swap 16th Street project. So there's a lot in the queue. We're really watching cash flow right now, as you're all well aware. We have a lot of stuff we want to do, a lot of great projects beyond even this list that we've talked about. We have to watch our cash flow. We have to watch our priorities, make sure that we're in sync with what the town council's vision for the town is, and that we're moving forward. So next slide, please. And just an example, this is pictures from 4501 West 16th Street. So again, this wasn't a bond. This was us purchasing a property that was dilapidated, taking the building down, finding out that there were some old gas tanks from the 1960s in there, getting those removed and making sure that that site is clean so the citizens of Speedway don't have to worry about contamination getting into the groundwater or anything else. So effective, and it's nice to have the money to be able to do projects such as that. Next slide, please. Any questions? I'll stop right there real quick. Any questions on the finances at this point? So we're going to move into 2019 projects. So we did quite a bit in 2019. Obviously, the number one, I'll go over these real quick because I have a slide for each of those. So actually, I won't. I'll just do them a slide at a time. But we can go to the next slide. So obviously, the most probably important one that we did was updating our economic development strategic plan. That actually started in 2018, ran through the fall of 2019. We were able to get an Ochre grant for that. We did add on some scope beyond that, which we paid for, but we are working on that plan. It obviously got derailed a little bit, like everything else, trying to figure out how we're moving forward until we can figure out what our finances are. So, but there's still plenty to be able to implement in there, and we keep that handy, and it's our focus moving forward. Our hope from a town is that we'll be working on a comprehensive plan that coincides with the two, so that our efforts are lining up with the overall town vision as well. So, but this is a good first step, and this was always the plan, was to have the economic development strategic plan first and then move from there. So that was important. Next slide, please. It's always those projects you weren't expecting, but are really excited about as well. Allison Transmission had two big announcements last year, and the vehicle environmental testing facility actually is opening anytime. I know they have a temporary CO and they're working towards permanent open. As you can see, the rendering to the actual building, Tim and I went out and got pictures the other day. They look identical. Love it when that happens. But the really neat building. They did a really nice job blending it into their campus, and from the outside it doesn't necessarily look like anything too crazy. It's nice, but the insides are really technologically advanced. A lot of neat features in there, and just a really neat building. I think I'm going to try to submit this one for the Monumental Awards. I just think the engineering of it are really fascinating, and I think it deserves some look for something unique to the Indianapolis area that should be recognized. So we're really excited about this project. Next slide, please. In addition, they announced and started on the Technical and Innovation Center on 10th Street, which will really transform 10th Street from what it was. As you can see, the bottom, that's kind of the current status of it. They're working to finish and complete the exterior, and then maybe take a slight pause to kind of wrap all their business, like every other business. They're still trying to figure out their revenues, and they fully plan on moving forward with this project, completing it as presented. Timeline's just a little bit different. We're also looking at improvements along 10th Street, including possibly burying the power lines, the town doing some improvements with sidewalks and street lighting along there. And then, as you maybe saw, they had purchased a couple properties down by the corner by the Speedway gas station, which will become a secondary entrance to this facility, as well as their test track. So it's a lot of changes along 10th Street. It's going to be beautiful when it's all done, and something we should really be proud of. And it's in progress. They're out there working on it. and the shell will be completed. Hopefully, I think they weren't giving me a really good timeline, but I think October is what they're planning on having that completed by. So at least the exterior portion. Next slide. Another success story for us. This one we had been working on since 2018. I kind of did a timeline of pictures on this presentation from when when I started, and there was a giant dirt pile. Vince is very familiar with the dirt pile. We figured out a way to get rid of that dirt pile. Well, move the dirt pile, I shouldn't say get rid of. Gave us a site that we were able to market and pick what ended up being, I think, a beautiful building. If you haven't been down on Gilman Street, I think we absolutely picked the right developer, and the building turned out fantastic. And we have just shy of 40,000 square feet of leasable space just off Main Street that I'm really excited about. So just the perfect example of a perfect redevelopment project. Difficult site, cleaned it up, and ended up with a really nice building that's going to add jobs and investment here in Speedway. So we should be really proud of that, and I hope to see that filled sooner than later. Next slide, please. We obviously have spent time and effort on 10th and Poco, again, probably since 2018 and beyond. We're getting close to the finish line there. There's still some additional grading. They got to do some reseeding. At the very bottom corner, I did snap a picture this morning out of my car and added it of the fencing to prove that the fencing's actually going up. I think it looks really sharp. But we're just trying to get to the finish line so we can get it mowed, cleaned up, temporary fencing down. And it's definitely an improvement of what was there, and it'd be nice to kind of close the chapter on that portion. We've been spending too much time, effort, and money on this, and it'd be nice to move forward. But something we worked on in 19. Next slide, please. Obviously, we had the Wilshaw Development Apartments side opened up, and has been successful. People have been getting used to the new arrangement. I've enjoyed the parking myself. I park in the public spots behind there a lot when I'm visiting Main Street. I find it convenient. And we're hoping that the occupancy rate goes up a little bit once we get the hotel portion figured out and moving. But again, another one of those that it came out as promised on the apartment side. Next slide, please. We talked a little bit about this. Obviously, we can't ignore the other side of that project that has been sitting there for over a year, not moving forward. So, as I mentioned, we zeroed in on a partner that's digging into the due diligence. We hope that, I'll give you a kind of worst case scenario as we get started, spring of next year, and hopefully it's sooner than that, that it'll be completed in 2021. Either way, whether we start this fall or next spring, depending on timeline and due diligence, it'd be completed in 2021 and be opening. So we won't be too far behind, about a year behind of what we anticipated. But projects don't always go smooth, and this is one example of that. Next slide, please. 1300 block of Main Street. It seems like a long time ago as well. So this was the cleanup portion. One of the holdups on this project was environmental contamination from the previous dry cleaner, and that was completed in 2019, where they had injected the test wells, and then they dug out a big chunk and filled it back in with clean dirt and paved that area. Looking back at my notes, I couldn't believe that was 2019. It seemed like a long time ago. But that environment, they're still monitoring the test wells, but that environmental cleanup's pretty much done. And then if you go to the next slide, that kind of brings us to where we are today. We talked about of hopefully the end of 2020, 21, we're moving forward to the future of the 1300 block with a nice new building that, again, brings some housing on Main Street, brings some additional retail and some amenities to the public in the form of a small pocket park. So we'll be working on that diligently over the next 60 to 90 days. Next slide. 2500 High School Road. This one, again, like all these projects, I feel like a broken record, took a little longer than anticipated. As with a lot of projects, has a lot of surprises. You couldn't talk about this project without a big pile of concrete piled up there. But we're making progress. In the end, we had to spend a little bit more money than we anticipated, but I always believe that you should do it right if you're going to do it. We're out there with the equipment, clean it up, reuse it, and then we don't have to worry about it in the future. So project's moving along. You can kind of see the plans. I think generally when I talk to everybody in the community, they're excited about it. They're excited about some of the tenants, and they're really excited to see what other tenants will sign on. And I think this is going to be a fantastic gateway to our community, which is what the vision was from day one. I think we're accomplishing exactly that. So next slide, please. And then, as we've mentioned, this isn't the exact rendering, but our Speedway Municipal Center is underway. That's actually more of a 2020 project, but started that process and that bond work in 2019 as well. Couldn't be more excited about this project, having everyone in one building, centralizing our services in the community, and it's going to be a really nice amenity for the public. So with that, that's where we're at. Any questions? There's one I had on the list that I didn't have a slide for, which was the next, it's not really our project, but it's important to the community, which is the next level grant, Trails Grant for the extension of the B&O Trail. That was secured by the Speedway Trails Association in 2019, and work is continuing on that, and we're excited about that. That's only going to make this community more vibrant, and we're excited and healthy, and meets all the needs of what the Redevelopment Commission's mission is. Any questions?
Great report, and nice slide presentation. That was good, Tim. Appreciate that. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, just one quick one on going back to the tax revenues
Yeah.
and everything. How much have we collected so far? I mean, payments were just due.
In
what, last
2020?
week? Yeah.
So we collected.
People paid early, or if everybody waited to the last.
Some of it depended on mortgages and if you had escrow or not.
Sure.
We collected, and sorry I didn't have that number right in front of me. It was right around 500,000, which we were expecting $2.some million, 2.1. So the final date was, our tax payments were due July 15th. Marion County Auditor has said that they're going to give us a payment in August. So right now we were significantly below, and it was really personal property. We only collected 4% of our personal property. So that's, which if I'm a big business going through this, I'm not going to pay till I have to as well. So we're hoping that a lot of that came through by the July 15th date. We'd love to be in the 80-90% of payments if we could. But we weren't the only one in that boat either. I mean, every taxing unit across the state was struggling with that as well.
Yeah.
But we had enough money to pay all our debts. Anything we got was going to help us get through and continue to move forward with projects, and we got the 500 or so thousand. But we still got a long way to go. So as soon as I get that number, I'll pass it along to you.
So we
that'll
should
help
see
us
it in
plan.
August, is what we're thinking.
What we really hope is that there just was a certain percentage that won't pay or couldn't pay due to the circumstances. So we'll just see what that number is. Generally, we're in the upper 90s of payments, people that don't miss. So 97, 98%. So we usually don't have that problem. So we'll see if that's reflected or not.
Great question, Gordon. Does anyone have any additional questions? All right. Mr. Graup, would you like to move on to the 2021 operating budget? You want to take a drink of water first?
All right. So we have two funds, as you're all aware. We have an operating budget that is replenished through land sales and income that we get from leasing property or parking cars or whatnot. And then we have the TIF funds. I just went over the TIF funds, but the operating fund is what we pay our salaries with, what we do marketing with, expenses related to our business, property management, things like that. So we didn't really, it was about 2 years ago now, this is our third actual budget where we actually put something on paper and decided to go through the normal process with the town council as all the other units do in town as well. So we line our recommendations up with what the town is asking all the other departments to line up. Even though we're slightly independent, we try to stay in line. Our clerk treasurer had recommended at this point no raises for employees. However, when all the budget numbers come in, we'll take a look at that, and that might be adjusted. But at this point, our assumption was no raises, and we'll see where that goes. So that's how I formulated ours. I should mention, actually, I forgot what I was just going to mention, so we'll keep moving. Again, no real changes in this. There's one I did want to mention. You probably noticed we haven't spent anything on longevity. We have it budgeted. The way that it works in payroll is your longevity is lumped into your salary. So at the end of the year on our budget versus actual, it looked like we went over a little bit on the director's salary, but we'll have not paid anything on longevity. For budgeting purposes, it's broken out. For payroll purposes, it's blended in. So you are seeing that every month, and that's just to account for the policy, the town's policy on longevity. I always have to mention, they recommended a 5% increase in health insurance. I built that in. We have yet to use that because I continue to use health insurance from my wife's employer. So I keep that line item in just in case, but we have yet to use that one, and I'm keeping that in line with recommendations from the clerk treasurer as well. Nothing else really changed on salaries and wages. If you look on the next page, supplies, this is where it gets, we've added some money because we're moving buildings. So there's a lot of unknown. This will be the last year that the SRC is the leaseholder on the annex, as we call it, which is our offices over in the strip center. So we pay all those expenses. We pay, Comcast, trash, cleaning, IPL, the list goes on, alarms. We will not have all that when we're in a consolidated. We'll pay a lease payment to the town, minus phone service. We'll get to that in a second. With all that being said, we just, being in a new facility, there's more bathrooms, more storage, more everything. So we just increased our office supply. We don't anticipate office supplies going up much. We're doing the same work. But we did add some FF&E in case we need some new desks, chairs, conference tables, whatever might come up. Understanding that we'll be up and functioning next year, and every year we can add on some things. But that unknown of that first year, we might need to help out and get ourselves situated moving forward. So just built in a little bit of consideration for that as well. Nothing too crazy. Any questions on that? No? Okay. Moving on to the next page, professional services. Day-to-day, a lot of our legal services, a lot of our engineering can come out of TIF if it's associated with a project. This is for all the other stuff. We've had the ongoing billboard lawsuit. The ongoing Wilshaw situation has had us take money out of legal services. So I dropped that last year, $20,000. We've used about 50% of that to date. I will say we have an unusual amount of ongoing legal representation for those type of projects. Not always normal, but I think that number is sufficient to get us through. And we can revisit it if some of those drop off and we're not using it in a future date. Continue to drop financial services. Your big expenses on financial analysis are if you take out a bond or some kind of financing. Day to day, we could probably drop that one a little bit more if you wanted. But if we have to engage and do some analysis and whatnot, that can add up fairly quickly. So I dropped it from 30 to 20,000, but we have not come close to using that the last couple of years. It's that kind of a safety net. And then same thing, professional services. 2 years ago, we used a ton of it. I try to use as much of that associated to projects out of TIF as possible. But this is your surveys, your appraisals, engineering for smaller projects, things like that, and that stuff adds up real quick. It's not cheap. So I did drop it to match the legal services. We're trending to be fine on that, and I don't anticipate, looking at our project list, I think we're going to be fine moving forward. We have some stuff to do, but again, those will be built into project costs. So. Beyond that, marketing promotion, we had bumped that up last year. We have not done a ton this year. We've done a few small things. It seemed like it'd be kind of a waste of money until we stabilize a little bit. We did take a step last time. We're working on new marketing and branding for the town. So now that they're kind of lining that up, I anticipate us updating a lot of our material and starting to do some more marketing and promotion next year, ramping that up a little bit. So I added a little bit of additional money in there in anticipation that we'll do a little bit more next year. Everything else stayed the same. Going down to utility services, again, I had dropped that down to 0 because I figured that'd be built into our lease rates for next year. However, then I thought when we purchase properties, like right now we have 2 citizens and 2 IPL bills coming in because we're leasing property. Figured I'd better leave a little money in there. And a change that you guys don't have in yours that I added another $500 in there. Even with the change in facilities, we'll still have the phone portion. They'll still build that out separate, so I did not add that in, so I added that in. It's about 600 some. I just bumped it up 500. But then trash alarm cleaning we won't have anymore, so I took that line item out. Again, maintenance and repair of office. We have a maintenance and repair general line item. We don't need it specifically for the annex because that lease isn't with us anymore. So if we have something we have to share in, we have a line item to be able to do that, so I put that to 0. And left everything else the same. That was the only real changes there. And then on the last page, again, this one might change. We really don't know. We've done some estimating. I plan on meeting with clerk treasurer and town manager tomorrow. Is the office rent. So the 17 that we have in there now is actually, if Brixmore is a little screwy with how we get ahead sometimes with common area. So if you look at our budget versus actual, we haven't actually paid a rent payment in 2 months. And then we paid a small one this month because we've kind of made ourselves back up. So at 17, we had actually had a little bit of money for the annex in the town manager's budget as well. I simply just took $1,500 times 12 and put a number in there that seemed, based on the square footage that we're going to be using, plus some common area, seemed like it'd be pretty close to in line. But until that's finalized, that's a holder. So you could anticipate that going up a little bit. I don't anticipate it being less than that, just with our share of costs in there. But we're working on that and trying to figure out those logistics as we speak. But again, we eliminated all those other line items, so we basically are a little bit below where we normally be. So overall, I'm recommending a decrease of about 7.6% in the budget, which is about in line with what we decreased last year as well. So as we're gathering more data, because we've had several years now, we're able to adjust our budget to get it more in line, because our first budget was really a guess based on invoices of previous year, and so we're starting to tighten that up and see what we're actually using, not using, and seeing some trends. The 2 big unknowns are what they do with pay raises, and then also the expenses associated with moving to a consolidated town hall. Be happy if there's any adjustments, anything you think we might want to be doing next year that's not in here, or any questions you might have. Happy to answer them, or at least take a note and ask the question.
Anyone have any edits or questions or additions? All right. Appreciate the rollout and explanation there of the 2021 operating budget, Tim. And another item for new business be the discussion with the 1300 block street project legal representation.
Yep. So obviously 1300 block is going to be a complicated project, a lot of moving parts, so we wanted to make sure that we had proper representation to be able to walk us through both the economic development agreement and any associated financing options that come about on that. So I had contacted a couple law firms, and overall, looking at both numbers, recommendations from our local attorney, Bob Clutter, as well as previous experience, I'm recommending the president use Barnes and Thornburg as our representation for drafting the economic development agreement.
Anyone have any questions or concerns? I'd entertain a motion to utilize Barnes and Thornburg for the 1300 block of Main Street legal representation.
Mr. President, I make a motion that we approve 1300 block Main Street project legal representation and to begin negotiations with Barnes and Thornburg and to authorize the president to sign the agreement.
With a motion and a second, we'll move to vote. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? And no abstentions. Motion passes 4-0. And then, as one additional item of new business, I'd like to mention that at the last town council meeting, they had appointed Barry Gardner. Unfortunately, Barry is not able to join us for this meeting, but hopefully will be here next week. Barry has, he's the CFO of the Wayne Township Schools, and he has also represented the Brownsburg School Board on the Brownsburg Redevelopment Commission in the past. So him and his family live in the Meadowwood area, and excited to have a fifth member back on the team. We're still obviously missing Mr. Pop Chef, and hopefully in the future we'll be able to memorialize him appropriately. But all that being said, Barry will be a great addition to the team. So.
One more item for
items?
new business, Mr. President. It is sneaking up on us with the assumption that Indianapolis 500 is moving forward. We are starting to get inquiries as to use of our lots, miscellaneous lots. Mr. Ramian and I have met to kind of talk about what our strategy was. There's a lot of unknown on this, crowd-wise, logistics-wise. So we don't anticipate, obviously, Main Street parking lots we're going to keep open as best we can, other than race weekend for patrons. So we don't have a lot of concern up and down there. We'll work on signage and whatnot, but we do get quite a bit of inquiries for the lot we own next to USAC, and then we also have the Zellman lot and the 4501 West 16th Street lot. So we have gotten a couple inquiries on vendor use for those lots, which I think I'm leaning towards recommending, taking a better look at. Just logistics of getting parking. I did talk to Tammy Smith. We're open to having parks, especially with the shortfalls that we've gotten because of COVID-19. We're looking at even possibly us parking the lots a few days just to make up some income for lost revenue if it makes sense. Because of the change date, there's some conflicts, and so we're going to look into that. But we're going to try to park what days we can on those lots. But if there's opportunities to possibly lease them out for specifically race weekend, not necessarily qualifying weekend, I would recommend that we at least take a look at those and bring them back to the SRC. I believe we have a meeting prior to that, so So that would be my recommendation, is to look at vendor options where possible, keep lots open on Main Street as much as possible. 1300 block is a little bit of a challenge. It's wide open. We don't really have any way to close it off. So we are looking at options for that, whether we can put some cabling up or barricades, or if we even need to do anything. We're not 100% sure what kind of parking situation we'll have. If it goes forward as planned and it's 50% capacity, 125,000 people, what does that parking look like? What do we anticipate? Will it even get down in that area or not? So those are all just unknowns we're trying to work through. And if at the end of the day, if some people get some parking on 1300 block, so be it for 2020, and we'll put a building there in 2021. So.
Yeah, just happy that ideally we're going to have a race.
Yep,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, understood.
It's a good problem to have.
No items for old business. Any additional comments from any of the members? Any good? All right. Just continue to wear your mask and continue to support the local businesses on Main Street. Everybody's open, and you can get in there. You do have to wear your mask if you're going to a restaurant to get seated, and they ask that you wear it on the way out. But other than that, please continue to visit the local businesses throughout the town. Any additional points? None. Hearing none, we'll adjourn the meeting with consent.